Tonight, Hollywood is trembling because an unexpected voice has finally stepped into the chaos, and it is the one person nobody believed would ever speak. Colleen Hoover, the author behind Ends With Us, has just broken her silence, and what she reveals changes everything about the explosive feud between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. This is not the version the studios wanted out. This is not the narrative anyone was prepared for. And the truth buried inside her new interview is far more shocking than anyone imagined. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may flip this entire controversy upside down. Tonight, as a spotlight turns and the world leans in closer, something begins to shift, because the silence that once wrapped itself around this entire situation has finally cracked, and the sound of that fracture is echoing all across Hollywood as people try to understand what really happened behind the scenes of It Ends With Us, and why Colleen Hoover breaking her silence now feels like the moment everything begins to unravel. And in this moment, a story that once looked simple suddenly stretches into something far more complicated and tangled and filled with quiet tensions and emotions and secrets that were never meant to be exposed to the public. And as we begin to walk into this timeline of events, it becomes clear that nothing here was ever straightforward, because the truth is not simply hiding, it's trembling, like a living thing trying to escape the hands that hold it. And the deeper we go, the more undeniable it becomes that the feud between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively did not erupt out of nowhere, but rather slowly simmered for months under the weight of miscommunication, pressure, expectations, and the fragile balance of creative control that can turn a working relationship into a battlefield without warning. And Colleen Hoover, the woman who wrote the story that started it all, found herself at the center of a storm she never asked for, a storm that kept pulling her further in, even as she tried to step back and remain neutral. And her silence only made the world hungrier for answers. And now that she has finally spoken, the tone of everything has shifted, because instead of offering clarity, she has stirred questions that cut even deeper into the heart of this conflict. And as we retrace the timeline, we begin with the moment she sold the film rights, a moment that should have been triumphant, but instead became the quiet first spark that would later ignite everything that followed. Because when she signed with Justin Baldoni and Wayfair, it was not simply a business deal, it was a choice built on trust and emotion and belief in his vision. She admired his passion, she admired the empathy he brought to the story, and she admired his promise to protect the heart of the narrative that mirrored painful memories from her own family. And at that time, she did not imagine any danger, any conflict, any feud that would grow so large it would overshadow the book itself. And yet the seeds were already there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the moment pressure and fame would make them crack open. And as production moved forward, Colleen found herself walking a thin line between author and observer, because she was invited onto the set, but only briefly. And she was given a cameo, but only in passing. And she gave feedback, but only when someone asked. And all of this began creating a strange emotional distance inside her, because this was her story, her heart, her past, her experiences shaped into words, and yet she felt herself becoming a spectator to the adaptation instead of a participant. And that feeling slowly sank into her like a shadow that refused to lift. And as the days moved forward, the silence between her and the production team grew heavier, especially regarding the creative decisions she privately worried about, but never openly voiced, because she did not want to be difficult. She did not want to interfere. She did not want to be labeled controlling. And so she stepped back and trusted the process, even when certain things unsettled her. And that silence became a puzzle piece that fit into the growing picture of the feud.
That would later be used against her in arguments and interviews because people would ask why she did not speak louder, and why she did not demand more control, and why she did not fight harder. And the answer is layered and fragile because Colleen Hoover is not someone who thrives in conflict. She is someone who carries weight quietly, someone who avoids chaos, someone who tries to protect the peace even when the peace is already broken. And that instinct guided her through every moment of production, but eventually everything changed. The day the tension between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively erupted into public view, creating a narrative that pulled her into the center with no warning and no protection and no opportunity to explain her own perspective before the world began forming its own assumptions. And when the lawsuits began and the accusations started twisting through the headlines, Colleen suddenly found herself in an impossible position, caught between two powerful figures whose conflict was swallowing the entire studio system around them. And even though she tried to remain silent, that silence began to feel like a statement of its own, as if her refusal to choose a side meant she secretly agreed with one of them, which was never her intention and never her belief. And yet the public continued interpreting her silence as something strategic or manipulative, instead of what it really was, which was simply fear, exhaustion, and emotional overwhelm, because the story meant something deeply personal to her, more than anyone else involved. And instead of celebrating the film adaptation she spent years dreaming about, she was now watching it become the centerpiece of one of the most chaotic Hollywood battles in recent memory. And that heartbreak is something she finally admitted in her new interview, something she could no longer hide, even as she still tried to choose her words carefully, because she did not want to anger anyone or trigger another wave of legal trouble. And so the version she offered in her interview is only half the truth, or maybe less than half, because she speaks with caution, every sentence guarded, every thought filtered to avoid stepping on landmines she did not place there. And the weight of that caution can be felt in every line of her statement as she tries to express disappointment without blame, sadness without accusation, distance without disloyalty. And yet, even in her careful phrasing, one thing becomes clear. The tension behind the scenes was far more intense and far more personal than anyone outside the production realized. And she hints at moments where she felt left out, moments where she felt unheard, moments where she felt misinformed, moments where she wanted to speak but held herself back. And those moments now form the foundation of a much larger hidden story, one that neither Justin nor Blake has fully told publicly, and one that seems to shift depending on which set of leaked messages or legal documents is examined. And that shifting truth is exactly why Colleen Hoover speaks with such restraint. Because at this point, every statement is scrutinized, every sentence is dissected, every pause is interpreted as bias. And she knows that choosing even one wrong word could be used as ammunition by either side in the ongoing legal battles, which would only place her deeper into a conflict she has spent months trying to avoid. And as she reveals this frustration, the truth becomes undeniable. She is not choosing both sides. She is not choosing neutrality. She is choosing survival. Because this controversy has not only taken over the film, it has taken over her relationship with her own work. It has placed a shadow over the book that came from one of the most painful memories of her life. And the fact that she no longer feels proud to mention its name is perhaps the most devastating consequence of all, because It Ends With Us was not supposed to become the center of drama. It was supposed to be a symbol of strength, a tribute to resilience, a message of healing. And now it is entangled in a storm that keeps pulling her identity as an author into places she never wanted to go. And as she speaks about this loss, the sadness in her voice is unmistakable, because this was her story, her mother's story, her family's story, and now the world sees it through the lens of a lawsuit instead of the lens of survival. And that shift has carved something heavy into her heart, something she has not fully admitted, but is felt in everything she says and everything she avoids saying. And as she continues describing the emotional toll, the interview subtly reveals something else, something deeper, something that explains why her silence lasted so long. She is afraid, not just of public backlash, but of hurting someone she cares about. And though she remains vague, it becomes clear that she worries far more about one side than the other. And though she never states it directly, the subtext reveals the truth. The person she fears upsetting is not Justin. And that unspoken detail slowly begins reshaping the edges of this entire conflict, suggesting that behind the scenes, there may be pressures, influences, or conversations the public has never been allowed to hear. And that hidden layer is where the real suspense of this story lives. Because as much as the public thinks they know the truth, there is an entire side to this situation that remains locked away behind carefully chosen words and legal limitations and unspoken loyalties. And every time she tries to step back, the storm pulls her forward again, reminding her that silence does not erase responsibility and neutrality does not protect her from fallout. And the deeper we dive into her story, the clearer it becomes that she is holding back something larger, something she has not yet admitted, something she may never fully reveal, at least until the trial ends and the dust settles and the fear lifts from her voice. And that looming truth is what makes her interview so haunting, because it hints at the real story, the complete story, the entire emotional map of what truly happened behind the scenes is still waiting, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the moment it can finally be told without consequences, without fear, without the weight of an entire industry watching every syllable.
In this next phase of the unraveling narrative, the tension spreading across Hollywood becomes almost palpable as insiders whisper and leak and speculate about the motives, the strategies, and the alliances forming behind closed doors, while the public watches with breathless fascination, unsure of who was telling the truth and who was masterfully guiding the storyline. Because the deeper you go into this chaos, the clearer it becomes that everything from leaked messages to offhand remarks to subtly placed articles in major outlets is being used as ammunition in a war that feels more like psychological warfare than a traditional industry conflict. And people who were once friendly acquaintances or collaborators now find themselves taking sides, even if they never intended to be part of the storm, as conversations about loyalty, accountability, and ethics stretch across boardrooms, talent agencies, production sets, and social gatherings, with everyone terrified that one misstep or honest opinion might pull them into the center of the tornado unfolding at high speed across the entertainment world, where perception is currency, reputation is fragile, and public narrative is often the most powerful weapon. Because what is happening here is not simply a disagreement between the individuals involved, but a public deconstruction of carefully curated images that were built over decades and maintained with precision through calculated interviews, red carpet appearances, charity partnerships, and multi-million-dollar brand endorsements. And when such images begin to fracture or shatter, the ripple effects are enormous, affecting not only those directly involved, but also the industries that profit from them, the fans who idolize them, and the media, which thrives on amplifying every detail, no matter how small or speculative. Because when something explosive happens in Hollywood, the machine activates immediately, spinning out narratives, counter-narratives, dubious insider tips, and social media commentary that evolves by the second and becomes almost impossible to track or verify, as influencers, pundits, gossip channels, and entertainment analysts all feed the fire, generating millions of views, while the actual truth becomes buried beneath layers of interpretation, assumptions, and public emotion. And in the midst of all this chaos, the legal dimension grows more intense, with attorneys analyzing every sentence, every phrase, every screenshot, and every leaked detail to determine how it might influence public opinion, juror perception, or judge commentary. As motions continue filing at a rapid pace, each one carrying implications that spread far beyond the courtroom and into the vast ecosystem of people who rely on the reputations of these high-profile figures. Because behind the scenes, studios are panicking, brands are reevaluating partnerships, executives are asking strategists to forecast fallout, and publicists are scrambling to prepare statements that can soothe the public while protecting their clients from the next incendiary revelation that might appear at any moment. And as this urgency intensifies, the relationships between key players begin to morph in strange, unpredictable ways, with former supporters stepping back cautiously, refusing to lend their names or voices to anything controversial, while others seize the opportunity to align themselves with whichever side appears morally superior to the general public at the moment, calculating each move like a chessboard. Because in Hollywood, alignment is everything, and credibility is currency. And no one wants to be the person who stood on the wrong side of a scandal that spirals into a cultural moment larger than anything they anticipated.
And through all of this, the individuals at the center of the storm are forced to navigate a maze of legal advisors, PR teams, crisis managers, image specialists, and trusted inner circle members who all have different agendas and strategies, proposing wildly different approaches, from going silent to going aggressive, to dropping selective truths to overwhelm the opposing side. And these conflicting strategies often create internal tension, which leads to more leaks, more miscommunication, and more opportunities for rival factions to twist the situation into something even more dramatic, as the cycle continues, feeding itself with astonishing speed, while the audience watches like they are witnessing a blockbuster narrative unfold in real time. And the truth is that once a scandal becomes this big, no one is fully in control anymore. Not the celebrities, not the studios, not the media, not the legal teams. Because the story has grown too large, too fast, too emotionally charged, and too interconnected with the public psyche for anyone to throttle its momentum. And that is precisely what is happening now, as analysts predict that the next hearings will be even more volatile, that new documents may surface, that previously private communications could be introduced as evidence, that additional witnesses might be compelled to speak, and that the turning point in this saga is rapidly approaching. And people across the entertainment world are already bracing for impact, because if even half of the rumors swirling through these circles are true, the situation is about to escalate into a collision of reputations, power dynamics, legal revelations, and personal betrayals, so dramatic that it could redefine how Hollywood handles internal conflicts in the future. And at the center of it all, the tension between carefully maintained facades and the raw, messy, chaotic truth continues pressing outward, threatening to topple long-standing narratives and force the world to confront uncomfortable realities that many would prefer to stay hidden. Because these revelations are not just about one conflict or one incident, but about a much larger pattern of how influence is weaponized, how perception is manipulated, and how far some will go to protect their image when the lights are brightest and the stakes are highest. And the public is watching every second, hungry for clarity, justice, drama, closure, and the next twist that will send shockwaves across social media and entertainment headlines, once again, as the saga builds toward its next explosive chapter. As we reach the end of this unfolding saga, it becomes clearer than ever that Hollywood is no longer operating in the world it once dominated. A world where polished PR, carefully crafted narratives, and a few well-positioned interviews could contain even the most explosive situation. What we are witnessing now is a complete breakdown of the old system, replaced by a fast-moving ecosystem driven by public scrutiny, digital footprints, and relentless exposure. The individuals at the center of this storm are discovering the hard truth that once the public loses trust, no amount of spin can fully reverse the damage. And in this case, the damage has grown into something far greater than a simple dispute. It has become a defining moment that reveals how fragile celebrity power structures really are when tested. The legal proceedings ahead will likely reshape everything. Evidence that once sat quietly in sealed files is now being demanded for public disclosure. Private conversations, once thought untouchable, are suddenly relevant. And the judge's insistence on transparency has forced the industry into an unfamiliar territory, where the consequences of hidden actions are no longer limited to whispers, they're potential headlines. That looming threat is sending shockwaves through Hollywood, pushing everyone from studio executives to publicists to reevaluate what they think they know about risk, loyalty, and damage control. What makes this moment even more profound is how quickly public sentiment has shifted. Fans who once defended their favorite stars without question are now demanding accountability. Commentators are calling for honesty. Influencers are dissecting every move, adding even more pressure to a conflict already weighed down by years of tension, secrets, and unspoken resentment. And the more each side tries to defend themselves, the more tangled the narrative becomes, as if every attempt at clarity simply reveals another layer of contradiction. That is the true chaos of the scandal, not just the actions that started it, but the avalanche of consequences that followed. Hollywood thrives on the idea of image, but this controversy has reminded everyone that image is not truth. And when image and truth collide, the fallout is always devastating. No one walks away unscathed. Not the stars, not their partners, not their teams, not even the media covering the situation. everyone is forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that the industry's brightest lights often cast the darkest shadows. But perhaps the most important takeaway is that this moment is far from over. In fact, the next chapter may be the most explosive yet. More documents will likely emerge, more witnesses may be pulled in, more revelations may shatter assumptions, and when the next hearing arrives, the entire entertainment world will be watching, nervous, divided, and bracing for impact, because they know that whatever happens next will not just finalize a legal battle, it will redefine reputations, reshape alliances, and potentially expose truths that could permanently alter the landscape of celebrity culture. One thing is certain, nothing will ever be the same again.